There's a lot of theories about how the Cleveland Browns quarterback situation is going to break for the 2025 season. I now have mine, and we're going to discuss it in depth on Browns 3D, which starts now. Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound Browns 3D on the OBR streaming network. We appreciate and thank everybody who comes to the OBR every day, whether it's to consume the written content from our fabulous group of writers or joining us every evening at 6 o'clock for the OBR streaming network, beginning with Browns 3D, hosted by me, your host, Jeff Lloyd, and various shows throughout the week. It is Friday. After this, at 7 o'clock, you will get Things I Think I Know, hosted by Brad Ward. Sorry we couldn't be with you yesterday. For you folks in Ohio, obviously, you've already gone through this. School year ending, still here in Jersey. We're going through it. My daughter, being a senior, we had to go out for senior awards last night. She received a couple of scholarships. As a parent, I could not be more happy or ecstatic of the path of this young lady. Avery, we love you. We are extremely proud of you. Let's get to the business of the day. In just one simple video from Brown's practice the other day, you see Shedeur Sanders just kind of having a fun moment with Joe Flacco about dancing. And I think Joe Flacco, kind of like most over 40 guys, I don't dance. I don't do public dance moves. Definitely drew a chuckle. But in that small video, I think I'm starting to realize the way the Browns quarterback situation is going to shake out in 2025. Again, this is what I see, and this is what I think. Now, it comes down to, again, everybody believes as a team when a season starts, you're going to be competitive, right? You should have a chance to compete. Then, after a certain amount of games, if you're not winning, if you're not successful, you start to see maybe that's just not the case. It's right off the bat, if you're going to ask me what gives the Browns in a difficult look, the schedule is difficult regardless, okay, but certainly difficult in the first 4 weeks. What gives the Cleveland Browns the best chance at being a competitive ball club in 2025 and certainly being a competitive ball club early in the season? We know what Joe Flacco can do within the Cleveland Browns offense. We've seen it. We physically have evidence. Joe's run in 2023 was magical. It was fun. One of the reasons why I was never a proponent of pushing for basically a quick sequel in 2024. I was wrong, but that's okay. But here we are now getting the sequel a year plus later, where Joe Flacco has returned to the Cleveland Browns. Jerry Jeudy would be the Amari Cooper. You're hoping Cedric Tillman can provide some spark. Maybe Deontay Johnson can be Elijah Moore. Elijah Moore played pretty well with Joe Flacco in 2023. You still have Jerome Ford. You've added Quinshon Judkins. You've added Dylan Sampson. You still have David Njoku. And yes, it's far-fetched to expect a huge production amount from rookie tight end Harold Fannin as a rookie. It's fair, but still a very nice piece. And I think Harold Fannin's overall intelligence and understanding and feel of just how to get open, just how to find the open spot within a defense, finding the soft spot, certainly could be something that is going to aid the Browns and their passing game, certainly in 2025. Do I believe a 40-and-a-half-year-old quarterback can be somebody that's going to have sustainability in a 17-game season, regular season, and then maybe even possibly a playoff run? To be honest, no. It's very difficult to believe that Joe at his age can go out week in, week out and perform at the level necessary to have this team competitive throughout 17 weeks. Not a knock, just a belief. Joe has been there. Joe has been doing this for an extremely long time. His track record speaks for himself, the good and the bad. But if I truly believe there's a way or a path for the Browns to be competitive right out of the gate, and keeping in mind, I do believe the defense will be improved as well, which should certainly help the overall product. And let's be honest, the special teams probably could not be worse than they were in 2024. You should be able to get back to more of a regular regular contributing running game, more consistency from the running game. Didn't really have it in 2023, certainly did not have it in 2024. Running more of the wide zone, which certainly aids and benefits your older offensive linemen, something they are just more comfortable with, something they spent many years in together, should make for a better overall product on offense. But however it goes with Joe, and whenever it maybe comes to where it's decision time to make a move or to go to somebody else, I know it's only May, and I know it's only been a couple of weeks. But for me, it appears the transition from Joe Flacco would be to go to Shedeur Sanders. For all the narratives, those that maybe were real and those that certainly were made up in regards to Shedeur Sanders during his draft process, some of it you see ultra confidence, belief in himself, believing he belongs. Some of it that was probably not talked about, or if it was, it certainly was not talked about enough in regards to Shedeur Sanders. Overall talent, work ethic, just general enjoyment of playing the game of football. He's shown to be open. He's shown to be of the ability of what you expect of the leader of the pack, which of course is the quarterback position. The teammates, at least the rookies, and we're starting to see more from the veterans, certainly starting to come in line and starting to appreciate the young signal caller out of Colorado. Shedor's arm talent speaks for itself. His tape, as far as physically throwing the football, speaks for itself. Again, as I've stated many times, my issues certainly were, with the amount of sacks he took, sacks that maybe he could have avoided, sometimes trying to extend a play that was, pointless. Sometimes you just have to accept when it's done and it's dead and just deal with it and come back to fight another down. So although trying to do everything you can to have your team succeed or trying to make a play work is admirable, it's not always the best thing to necessarily do at the quarterback position. I mean, there were times where he took his team out of field goal position. There were times where you were looking at 3rd and 9 and all of a sudden it became 4th and 24. These aren't, lies. These are facts. But you see just the way Shedeur works. The release, very clean, knows where to hit the window of opportunity to find his guys. Throws a very catchable ball. Shedeur Sanders, and whether he's the long-term future of the Cleveland Browns, we still have a long, long way to go before we hit on that. But when you see just the way Shedeur acts, the way he carries himself, Shedeur Sanders does not believe he was a 5th-round pick. Shedeur Sanders does not have expectations that any 5th-round pick would. Shedeur Sanders believes he is here to play and start sooner rather than later. It's a mindset, it's a makeup. It is certainly something, that has been stilled upon him at an early age through his Hall of Fame father, who also happened to be his coach. And I did say wherever Shedeur went, that was going to be how essentially you would view him, of course, obviously, right? But Shedeur now leaving the nest of comfortability, which was, playing all this time with his father highly involved, either as part of the coaching staff or as the head coach where Shedeur was playing. Shedeur Sanders, if his name was Shedeur Smith, as we said, he would never have ended up on day 3. And however he ended up going on day 3, whether it was done by just not understanding the draft process from his family, or some people just making this whole situation hard because he was Deion Sanders' son. None of that matters now, and none of it certainly matters to Shedeur Sanders. It is nothing he is talking about anymore. The media is. He is not. It is nothing he is acting like. He hasn't shown any signs of coming in here as being aggravated, agitated, or pissed off. Which, to be fair, if you did see signs, not saying it would be okay, but it would maybe be understandable. Shows no signs of this situation rattling him. No signs of running away from the bright lights of being QB1. Yes, the Browns have not put him basically in that path where he is competing for the starting gig. But for what he's done to this point, it's hard to fathom how he is not going to be in legit competition for this gig soon. Mandatory minicamp next week, then one more round of organized team activities the following week to close out the spring period. Everybody breaks for a month. Then we see you all come late July, and 2025 training camp kind of gets off the ground. We've heard Shedeur speak about, being the young quarterback to the veteran. We see that Shedeur is already trying to, make this relationship with Joe Flacco be something. And I can tell you right now that there is no way Deion Sanders is not telling his son, you watch Joe Flacco and you watch how Joe Flacco does it, how he carries himself, how he practices, how he performs in the classroom, how he performs in the film room. You don't look at a guy like Joe Flacco at 40 years old who has been in the NFL since 2008, and you don't use him as some sort of role model or some type of guy that you are not trying to copycat in your habits as far as, again, on the field, in the classroom, handling the media, handling the community, all of that. So I do believe while this room is made up of Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett, Dillon Gabriel, and Shedeur Sanders, I do believe this is truly a two-man deal. It'll be Joe Flacco to start. It'll be Shedeur Sanders when the Joe Flacco run runs its course. I think we will see Kenny Pickett traded sometime between late August and early September. Dillon Gabriel, and, I'll harp on this again. I think it's just a really difficult situation for Dillon Gabriel. For what may have seemed when he was originally drafted on Friday night of day 2 of the draft, seemed like a nice situation. If it's come out now that we knew Kevin Stefanski was a big Dillon Gabriel guy, it was probably not hard for Dillon Gabriel to believe that the Browns were a good option for him. There's no way he walked out of there and said, well, I don't think Cleveland's an option. It looks like Coach Stefanski hates me. If he was liked by Coach Stefanski, I'm sure Dillon Gabriel knew that. The issue is 14, 15 hours after being drafted by the Cleveland Browns, Dillon Gabriel then watched the Cleveland Browns draft Shedeur Sanders. And I'm not going to say that Dillon Gabriel was a better prospect than Shador Sanders. He may have been drafted higher than Shador Sanders, but I don't believe that he was a better prospect than Shador Sanders. There's certainly some things that Gabriel has going for him that may be a little bit better than Shador. Better runner of the ball. Didn't take as many bad sacks. Granted, the offensive line at Oregon looked like one of the greatest offensive lines in NFL history compared to the offensive line at the University of Colorado. But if this were to be a straight one-on-one battle between Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders, I don't see how anybody thinks the battle goes and the victory would go to Dillon Gabriel. Shedeur's just more talented. He just has much better God-given ability. And again, it's not a knock on Dillon Gabriel. And the Dillon Gabriel fit due to the fact that Coach Stefanski thought he was a good fit for him and his offense. Seemed great. But Shedeur kept falling, and the Browns no longer could ignore it and ignore the possibility of bringing in someone with his type of talent. I think Joe Flacco starts week 1. I don't know how long the Joe Flacco run goes. But when the Joe Flacco run is over, it's going to be Shedeur Sanders' time. Does Shedeur keep the job? Does he hold off 2 first-round picks potentially next April? We're a long way from knowing the answer to that. But Shedeur Sanders is already beginning, in my opinion, what is going to be a pretty impressive run just to get from the 4th quarterback on the roster to possibly being the Browns starter, say maybe as early as mid-October, if not possibly earlier. Terry McLaurin, Washington Commanders, waiting on his contract extension. And for McLaurin and his camp, I absolutely agree with what they are doing. Terry McLaurin was always going to be an interesting fit into the NFL because he was coming into the league at an older age as opposed to most rookies. Basically hit the ground running from day one with Washington. Performed and produced early with Washington. So Washington was quick to get a deal done to extend Terry McLaurin. But now here is McLaurin looking for yet another deal, which he deserves. Now, I ultimately think Washington is not going to screw this up. And the last thing Washington would want to do is change things and basically screw things up for their now second-year quarterback, Jaden Daniels, who performed so incredibly well as a rookie. There were many Browns fans when the news came out, and look, it is just pandering. As far as, McLaurin thinking that maybe, Washington's kind of, shuffling their feet, so to speak, here, as far as satisfying their wide receiver. And I knew where it was going to go. And all the Browns fans, well, Terry, come home. And no knock on Terry McLaurin. Fantastic football player. But there are reasons that even if Terry McLaurin were put out on the market, the Browns most likely would not have interest. This will be Terry McLaurin's age 30 season. We were having same discussions about Amari Cooper a year ago, who was entering his age 30 season and was wanting a contract extension. The Browns had no interest in giving Amari Cooper a contract extension. They actually manipulated his contract so he could get more of his money up front, a way to satisfy, some of the asking that Amari Cooper was doing, but also a way for the Cleveland Browns to have an escape route for Amari Cooper in case things went south in his age 30 season, like the Browns were anticipating was going to happen. Team didn't play well. Cooper's play was very shaky and up and down. The Browns found a way to move Amari Cooper to the Buffalo Bills for a top 100 pick. Played the entire situation beautifully. They got in on Amari Cooper, got his age 28 and 29 season, years 22 and 23, and Amari Cooper performed extremely well for them. The Browns took him and paid him on the contract that he was on and gave up a 5th-round pick. 2+ seasons later, they were able to move him to the Buffalo Bills for a top 100 pick. Played the entire situation beautifully from the beginning to the end. Jerry Jeudy was acquired for a 5th-round pick at a much younger age. The Browns signed him and extended him right away. And Jerry Jeudy went out in 2024 and basically proved to be one of the lone bright spots of the Cleveland Browns offense in the 2024 season. We now have a guy so far in OTAs here in the spring of 2025 who just looks head and shoulders above the rest of a lot of the offense, a lot of the talent on the Cleveland Browns offense. Just an absolutely beautiful move. Others have brought up, the Browns may have had some interest in Chris Olave. Again, similar situation. The right age, and the Browns may be trying to get in on establishing a good young wide receiver, keyword being young, for not a ton of compensation. But keeping in mind, the Browns brought in Amari Cooper and Jerry Jeudy and only spent 5th-round picks on both of them. Even if Terry McLaurin were available, a 5th-round pick is not going to get it done. So there's 2 strikes as far as if he were available, whether or not the Cleveland Browns would have interest. Age 30 season, which is a huge strike for the Cleveland Browns. And I had some people, then just don't do anything, whatever, don't improve. You guys have to understand. The Browns have these things set in stone, the way they view things, the way they handle things, the way they view certain situations. They're not going to waver from that. And they're certainly not going to waver from it when basically the thought process on Amari Cooper worked out perfectly to the letter of their plan and of their thought process and beliefs. They're not going to change that. So Terry McLaurin turning 30, and this being his age 30 season, is a huge turnoff for the Cleveland Browns. The fact that the Cleveland Browns would have to give up more than a 5th-round pick to acquire Terry McLaurin is also a major turnoff for the Cleveland Browns. So while Terry McLaurin is a fantastic player, he is not a player the Cleveland Browns are going to have interest in if he were to be made available. And all of this, I do believe, is just posturing. Because at age 30, I'm sure Washington is not in the most enviable situation of having to extend their soon-to-be 30-year-old wide receiver. But they understand it is a necessity to continue the great success they had in 2024 with rookie quarterback Jaden Daniels, and certainly the other additions they made here, whether it being Deebo Samuel or being the acquisition of bringing in a solid left tackle like Laramie Tunsil. So Terry McLaurin, unfortunately, great player. But again, if he were to be made available, it's not a phone call the Cleveland Browns are going to make. The entire Pittsburgh Steeler Aaron Rodgers nonsense apparently has finally come to an end. My first thought on all of this is I don't think anybody is surprised. The way the Pittsburgh Steelers have handled their entire offseason makes me believe that they always knew Aaron Rodgers was eventually going to be their signal caller. Could have drafted a quarterback in round 1. They didn't. They waited till round 6. Bringing back Mason Rudolph didn't have anybody believing that was going to be the Pittsburgh Steelers starting quarterback here in the 2025 season. Am I worried that the Pittsburgh Steelers have just brought in Aaron Rodgers as their starting quarterback here for the 2025 season? Honestly, no. At this point, while still being a viable and good quarterback within the NFL, Aaron Rodgers is probably more harm than he is help at this stage of his career. He's always been about himself. He's always been probably one of the epitome of, that there is an I in team. It was a weird market for quarterbacks this year in the offseason. And I think a lot of teams kind of maybe had to make decisions that they weren't necessarily 100% sold on as far as the quarterback position. But if you needed a quarterback, you had to understand there were going to be warts, there were going to be hiccups, there were going to be situations that maybe just weren't necessarily the best fit for your franchise. But you couldn't just punt on quarterback in the offseason and say, oh, well, we'll wait till 2026. Pittsburgh has added Caleb Johnson at running back. They've added DK Metcalf at wide receiver. They moved on from George Pickens. And I got to be honest, DK Metcalf, George Pickens, and Aaron Rodgers, God, that would have been fun. From the combustibility factor, that would have been fun. Do I think Pittsburgh is getting better quarterback play in 2025 than they got in 2024 from Justin Fields and Russell Wilson? I'm not sure. I'm honestly not sure. Because at least with Justin Fields and Russell Wilson, you were actually getting some mobility at the position. You were getting the threat of the quarterback keeping the ball. Certainly more with Justin Fields, but Russell Wilson still had the capability of doing that and showed that in 2024. With Aaron Rodgers, you're going to get a little bit more of the overall passing game than maybe you did. Russell Wilson has basically made a living in the NFL by either throwing deep outside of the hash marks or throwing crossing routes or outs outside of the hash marks. Aaron Rodgers, or at least open up, the entire palette of the passing game. Still not guaranteeing that's going to lead to much success. People are putting up, these graphics. Oh, well, look at the Pittsburgh Steelers offense now. I mean, I see the changes. I don't know if it means that, all of a sudden this team is now world beaters or going to be contending in the AFC North or the AFC overall. I just don't. And, once again, Aaron Rodgers got the entire league to spend, 3 months talking about him. Whatever. It's getting old in the tooth. It's getting long in the tooth. It's just getting annoying at this point. The me. I just can't do it anymore. I really can't with Aaron Rodgers. Once a guy that I absolutely had, just an affinity for as a player and thought the world of him. The more you get to see guys and the more you get to see the way they conduct themselves, the more you kind of end up just, just having your thoughts where you're just not a huge fan of said player. The AFC North is certainly going to be interesting. I think all roads go through Baltimore. Cincinnati doesn't have a defense. The Browns, there's a lot of what ifs and, can this guy and that guy and this and, it's a team that this team is going to be successful. Pittsburgh is basically have all their eggs in the Aaron Rodgers basket. And if it doesn't work out and it's the year that Mike Tomlin finally doesn't make the playoffs, how weird is it going to look that this team just, found no true answer at the quarterback position after Ben Roethlisberger finally retired? We get back at it next week, mandatory mini camps. We'll have a lot to talk about. Certainly, media availability, media in there the entire time. So certainly looking forward to that and the growth path for certainly the rookies, which will be the story of the 2025 Cleveland Browns. But again, I think this is Joe Flacco's team. until Joe Flacco shows that it is time to turn it over to Shedeur Sanders. Again, we appreciate everybody coming out to the OBR every day, read the written content, joining us every night at 6 p.m. on the OBR streaming network, beginning with Browns 3D. Friday night, you will have Brad Ward with Things I Think I Know beginning at 7 o'clock, so stick around for that. Make sure you subscribe to the OBR on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to the OBR over on Twitch. This has been your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound. Browns 3D on the OBR, and we'll talk to y'all soon.